Hey everyone, I'm Kristan Hawkins. Welcome to this live edition of Explicitly Pro-Life. If you're tuning in and listening through one of the podcast subscription services, Spotify, iTunes, you're getting this late because I'm going live on Facebook because I got a lot of people who were able to watch the podcast last week instead of having to download it, wait for the download and listen to it, and they got the information first. So make sure you are subscribing to Students for Life's Facebook, I guess, because who knows when I'm going to come and do a live podcast again. And if you haven't, if you're watching on Facebook, make sure you subscribe to my podcast and you go to wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, wherever, subscribe to Explicitly Pro-Life. I'm sorry when you put in explicitly, sometimes it gets a little crazy when you search, but you can just search my name too. But okay, so tonight, what do I want to talk about? One thing, the Democrats have lost their minds when it comes to abortion. It has been a crazy week in Washington, D.C. A crazy week. They have gone radical. In midst of this, imploding primary where we still don't really know who won Iowa. You've got these people that were supposed to win New Hampshire, but then didn't do very well in New Hampshire. Then other people, it's kind of crazy. In midst of this imploding Democratic primary, and all that we're facing as a country and what the Democrats who are running for president are actually proclaiming, we have the Democrats in Washington, D.C., led by Nancy Pelosi, going nuclear on abortion. They are not, let me emphasize this, they are not just doubling down on abortion. They're not tripling down on abortion. They have gone full nuclear on abortion in Washington, D.C., amidst of everything that's going on. So I'm going to talk about 3 things right now that have happened or are happening this week on Capitol Hill. 3 things you probably haven't heard about on the mainstream news. This is why I don't ever even watch. I had my husband install a TV in my office and I don't even watch it because I'm like, why would I watch this thing? And they're not going to cover anything that matters that's actually happening. But that's a longer podcast about the state of cable news networks. But okay, so 3 things that are happening that you probably haven't heard about that you need to know about. The first thing you need to know about, ERA. I have been like a broken record, I feel like, talking about the ERA for the past 2 years. And I'm going to keep being a broken record. I'm sorry to say, because the left, the abortion industry, continues to talk about the ERA. Now, this week at Georgetown University, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, not a pro-life Supreme Court justice. I mean, this woman, if you ever want to read true, just flat out, I mean, honestly, I have a hard time calling people this, but if you just want to read evil, read Ruth Bader Ginsburg's dissent in the 2007 Supreme Court decision where they found that, maybe some abortion procedures are too terrible. Maybe they're too gruesome, like partial birth abortion, and maybe they should be restricted. You should read her one-woman dissent of the partial birth abortion case in 2007 because it is unbelievable the things you hear, okay? So anyway, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, not a pro-life Supreme Court justice at all, not a pro-life advocate. She is well known to be staunchly pro-abortion. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which I think a lot of people weren't even sure is alive and well, and was speaking at Georgetown Law School this Monday. What did she say at Georgetown Law School? That despite the fact that she's in favor of the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, or as we call it, the Everything Related to Abortion Act, it's dead. The ERA is dead. She reaffirmed what President Trump's Department of Justice said last month. The ERA is dead on arrival. And she made a very simple point of, yes, you had these latecomer states, Nevada, Illinois, and if the final one was this January, Virginia, and said that they've ratified. And Virginia said, we are the 38th state to ratify. ERA is ratified. It's not. And she said, yeah, but the deadline was in 1982, 3 years before I was born, by the way. So, I mean, this thing expired 3 years before I was born. It's pretty old. So she's like, okay, you had these latecomers who are saying that they somehow ratified, even though it was very clear that the deadline expired. And then you also had 5 states that actually, after 1982, went back and rescinded the ratification of the ERA. And there's some question is rescission legal? Can you rescind the ERA? Well, they did. And I think if anyone would ever go and actually say that it was ratified, you would see a lot more states then go and rescind the ERA. It just a lot of people don't talk about because everyone's like, oh, it's dead. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg kind of killed it. But tomorrow, Thursday, there's going to be a vote in the House of Representatives. It's going to be mostly a dog and pony show for the Trojan horse of abortion. We know we'll probably lose. The House Democrats, have the majority, and they are a majority pro-abortion. There's a couple of Democrats, thankfully, who are actually pro-life in the House of Representatives, but they are in the extreme minority. So the House Democrats are going to vote tomorrow. Our team at Students for Life Action will be there, and they're going to say that the House is going to declare that the 1982 deadline was unconstitutional. That didn't matter. Which, by the way, even if you are a staunch pro-abortion advocate, and I've actually heard pro-abortion feminists argue this point, this is dangerous precedent to start just kind of making up your own rules whenever you feel like you can. Because the Democrats aren't always going to be in control of the House of Representatives. So do they really want to start doing that? It's not really a good idea to do this. I mean, hopefully they aren't control of the House of Representatives come this time next year. So House is going to vote. They're going to say that the deadline was meaningless, that the ERA is ratified. It's not going to go anywhere in the Senate. There's no way the pro-life majority Senate is going to let it go anywhere. We already have this, even if it goes to the courts, and there's been a couple of state attorneys generals who now are trying to do federal lawsuits and all those things. So it probably might end up in the courts soon. If it does end in the courts, we already have the DOJ. We have a sitting Supreme Court justice who's not with us on abortion, who's very pro-abortion, who's actually already even said it's dead on arrival. So I'm not terribly worried about it. However, and the reason why we've been talking about Students for Life America and Students for Life Action for so long is because in politics, a lot of times, especially on the other side, things will be passed, things will be attempted that they know don't have a chance in hell. Why? Why are they doing it? Always ask yourself that question. Why? They're doing it because they want to create a public firestorm over this issue. A lot of women, a lot of people in America they don't even know that the ERA wasn't ratified. They remember the ERA fight, but they don't remember, because, people's attention spans, sadly, are very short. They don't remember this. There was this long, prolonged fight. Then Phyllis Schlafly, one of my heroes, stood up and was this one woman show who stopped it 3 states short of ratification. I mean, this was a long fight. There was a time limit. They missed it. They got an extension to 1982. They missed that one. So a lot of people don't know the ERA isn't in the Constitution. And so there was actually an article last summer when I was researching this, trying to figure out how much organizational time and energy should we expend upon fighting the ERA, something that's already, we know, is legally dead. And it was interesting to me because I was reading these interviews that very staunch abortion supporters. So the Ellie Schmiel comes to mind. She was one of the folks I was reading about. She is I think she's the founder of the Feminist Majority Network, which is hilarious. I've gone undercover at their events before, and there's 80 people, and then they have this big banner, "We are the majority." But it actually speaks to what they do. This is what they do all the time, right? There's 80 women gathered at an event, and then they call themselves the majority, and they have a great banner, and then they call press, and then they get national press for this event. And it's wait a minute, you're not the majority. There's 80 people. There's 80 of you there, right? But it's not really what you have. It's what your enemy thinks you have. This is a Saul Alinsky. I've talked about this before. Rules for Radicals. This is that playbook that President Clinton, and especially Senator Hillary Clinton, wannabe President Clinton, President Obama, they follow Saul Alinsky and the rules for radicals that Alinsky laid out. He was a community organizer in Chicago, and one of his principles, one of his rules, and I always think about this, is power isn't what you think you have, what you actually have in politics. It's what your enemy thinks you have. And that's why the Feminist Majority Network says they're the majority when they're clearly not. It doesn't matter. And they're actually unashamed. I would be embarrassed to have a banner saying we're the majority and have 80 people show up at my national conference. I mean, hello, National Pro-Life Summit, over 3,000 sold out, but whatever. But Ellie said something to a progressive liberal writer, and I don't know if she thought she was safe or she just didn't care, but she actually said something last summer about the ERA, and she was asked about this question, like, why are you pushing this? Isn't this dead? And Ellie Schmiel said very openly, yeah, but it's about the public. It's about the PR, right? So go to Congress, get this thing, passed, this resolution passed saying that the ERA time limit never expired. You get people get excited, go on social media. This is what they did in Virginia 2 weeks ago. Yes, we've ratified ERA. Women are finally equal, which, by the way, we always were equal. We are equal, but okay. So they're going to go to social media, declare this, and then they're going to wait for the mean old Republicans and conservatives and pro-lifers to say, no, women aren't equal. ERA didn't pass. And then they want a public outcry. They want women across the United States to say, this is ridiculous. This should have been passed. And they want to create fast momentum that way. Do you see how they do this? Think about, and we don't get into, and I try not to get into too many other issues besides abortion on this podcast, because we all know there's a hell of a lot of things just to talk about when it comes to abortion. But one thing I do know is when you look at Obergefell, think about the Supreme Court decision to legalize gay marriage. And there's a lot of opinions in the pro-life movement about that. I think the majority are on one way, but there's different opinions. No matter how you feel about it, think about what happened days, not months, not even weeks, days after the Obergefell decision. Instantly, the conversation changed to transgender bathrooms. It was so fast. The left was right there. They were ready to freaking go. They had it teed up. And so those on the other side, those on the political left, do a really good job of getting the public teed up about an issue, doing something that they know isn't going to be possible, just to then make people mad and riled up. So then they demand what it is that they want. Make sense? All right. So if you haven't called your U.S. House of Representative, if you're watching this now on Facebook, you need to call them first thing in the morning, and you can go to exposeera.org/takeaction. This is a coalition website Students for Life was proud to be a part of, and you can tells you right there how to contact Congress, and actually will call your phone. So you just put your phone number in, and the system auto dials you immediately and patches you in. It's great. Like, you can do activism in less than 2 minutes. It's fantastic. I did it with like 4 screaming kids the other day. Okay. So if you haven't called your U.S. House of Representative, if you're watching now, if you're listening in the morning and you're like one of my top explicitly pro-life fans and you listen to it as soon as the show goes live, make sure you call. If you're watching this after Thursday, listening to this after Thursday, make sure you call your senator and tell them when this comes, make sure you're voting against. And, look up to see how your representative did and call and either thank them or berate them for how they vote on Thursday. So ERA, we're going to continue to hear about it. And I've talked about this before. What's the why here? Why are they doing this? The real, reason why we hear this is because the abortion left is terrified of what we know is coming, which is Roe and Doe are going to fall. And they are trying desperately to find a way to enshrine abortion into our Constitution and force all taxpayers to pay for abortion. Okay. So that's why. That's your why. And then you have the why of why this, why going after this dead thing will work. That's the public outcry. Okay. Second thing you didn't hear about this week, and another point to why Democrats have lost their minds in Washington, D.C. The Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. It used to be called the Born Alive Infant Protection Act. Now it's the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. It failed last February in the U.S. Senate. They needed I think it was a veto-proof majority for quorum, and it failed. And you might be asking yourself, didn't we pass this in like 2001, 2002? We did. But I didn't know this at the time. And heck, I was, I think, just graduating college when this happened. When it was originally passed, there wasn't criminal penalties. This changes the law and actually attaches criminal penalties to medical professionals who do not administer life-sustaining care to babies born alive during abortion. Common sense. You would think every single American, regardless of how they feel about abortion, would be in favor of passing this. But they aren't. Democrats are against it. That's why it failed last February. It didn't have that veto-proof majority in the quorum vote. Then a lot of groups started saying, hey, you voted, Mr. Senator or Miss Senator, you voted against protecting babies born alive in an abortion facility. You voted for infanticide. And the Democrats are like, wait a minute, no, we're not pro-infanticide. Why would you say that? The right is crazy. The pro-lifers, they're lying to you. So Senator Sasse said, fine, let's bring it back up. So this week, there was a hearing on the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. The Democrats have been super quiet about it. They're going to push another vote. And we're going to have on record whether or not the Democratic Party supports or rejects infanticide. I'm not really a betting person because I don't have a lot of dollars to bet, but I could pretty much tell you how the outcome is going to be. Democrats do not want this vote. They don't want to be on record voting against this bill because it makes them sound like inhumane, right? Makes them sound crazy, makes them sound like the extremists that they are. But they also don't want to be on record. They don't want to be on record supporting it because where are all their dollars coming from for their campaigns? Who are their door knockers? It's the abortion industry has their hooks in deep into the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party political machine. And so these candidates for office, any of these senators who are running for re-election, they're going to be damned if they do, damned if they don't. I'm sure they feel that way. And this is an important vote for them, but it's a hard vote for them because if they go on record saying they think that babies born alive during an abortion should get basic life-sustaining care, what like 99% of Americans agree with, they're undercutting they're undercutting their actual argument for abortion, right? If these babies can survive outside the womb, then why are you saying that it should be legal to kill them? Minutes earlier, they should have been killed. The 2 inches that they were in their mother's vaginal canal made somehow all the difference in their human rights, their location. So if they say they're for this life-sustaining care, what they're admitting is they're in favor of killing babies who can survive. And no one wants to be for that. It undercuts their entire argument, right? Because all we hear all the time in the abortion movement is that these babies are nothing. They're not babies. I saw on Twitter recently someone said, I want to do a podcast on mean tweets. I think it'd be really funny to read to you some of my mean tweets. But somebody said, you have fetus fetish syndrome. And so they, accused us of having this fetish for fetuses. And we romanticize, someone else said we romanticize fetuses, these blobs of tissue, these parasites. So that's why Democrats and people who, say that they're pro-choice, they can't really support a bill that mandates that care, life-sustaining care, like oxygen. It's mostly oxygen because babies are born premature. Anyone who knows of a child, or if your child is born premature, one of the biggest challenges we have is the lungs, right? Because the lungs aren't actually fully developed in a child until about 36 weeks. That's why when I was like really pregnant with my daughter and we had no family in Minnesota and I kept saying, please just induce me or let's do a C-section. Like I need to have this baby planned because I'm not going to, if I go into labor and we're by ourselves, my husband's going to miss it because the kids, we won't have anyone to watch the kids. And he was like, we can't induce until 36 weeks, Kristan. So trust me, I know. So yeah, Democrats can't do that. They can't say that they're in favor of providing life-sustaining care to babies born alive during abortion, because if they do, they undermine their entire argument for late-term abortion, because then they're admitting that these are babies, that these are human beings that can live, and they think it's okay to kill them. I also think they don't want to vote for it because, one, I don't think a lot of them are really this extreme on abortion. I don't know. I have a hard time believing the worst in people sometimes. I know it might surprise you, but I do. And I have a hard time believing a lot of these candidates actually, and I think it's the same thing we see on campuses, even when people come and protest and yell at us. I have a hard time believing a lot of these folks actually believe what it is they're espousing. It's more of a talking point. They can get angry with you. But then when you actually have to vote, or if you had to say, fine, you're for abortions, you go kill that baby. Can you commit the abortion? They won't be able to commit the abortion. No one wants to commit the abortion. Why? Because in their gut, they know there's just something wrong with abortions. So yeah, and I mean the third reason why Democrats can't vote for these bills is because their campaign funding's coming from Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood's pledged to put over $45 million in the campaign against Trump. That's not even saying all of like the state and regional PACs that they have with their affiliates. So who knows what they're going to be putting into, U.S. Senate races and the House races and to state legislative races. There's going to be money everywhere, and they're going to be doing everything they can to stop pro-lifers. So, follow this bill, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. You're going to be hearing more about it. If you're talking to your U.S. senators, and if you've got a couple seconds, call them in Washington, D.C., call their district offices and say, I want you to vote on this. I want you to vote on this. And obviously, I want you to vote to give life-sustaining care to babies born alive during abortion. Where you're born shouldn't dictate your level of rights. Shouldn't change the basic protection and care you should get. Think about the argument that they're making here. Is that where you're born determines whether you live or die. All right, the third thing you are not going to hear about this week, but you really should have. So there was a hearing today on the Women's Health Protection Act. Oh, sounds good. Just like the Equal Rights Amendment, right? Ooh, sounds good. By the way, Equal Rights Amendment is everything related to Abortion Act. Pass it on. It's going to take off. Women's Health Protection Act sounds like a good thing. Wrong, bad. This is the summation of this bill. If the Women's Health Protection Act ever becomes law, it will make it illegal to pass laws restricting abortion in every state. So the abortion lobby knows they're losing in states. There was this, David B. Wright and I actually did a podcast at the end of the year about the secret playbook of the abortion industry. You should really listen to that podcast. One, because David B. Wright is amazing. He'll pump you up and get you super excited. But two, because we talk about this report, the Reproductive Healthcare Investors Alliance report that came out 2 years ago that nobody is talking about in the pro-life movement. In the report, they do their SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats of the pro-abortion industry. And they actually say on like page 4, their stated goal is to increase supply and demand of abortion and birth control. So don't ever let anyone tell you that all of their, funding for birth control and all their efforts are really to reduce abortion. Nope. It's on their stated plan. Their goal is to increase supply and demand. So anyway, in this report, one of their biggest weaknesses and one of the biggest threats they identified was state-level legislation. State legislation that defunds abortion vendors, Planned Parenthood, legislation like 24-hour waiting limits, legislation like parental notification, legislation like ultrasound requirements, legislation like ambulatory surgical requirements, which is going to be coming up to the Supreme Court. I'm going to talk about in a second, requiring that abortion facilities have the same level of medical standards that other ambulatory surgical centers have. I know, shocking. So anyway, there's been like 500 pro-life laws that have been passed in the last, I think, decade in states, while Washington, D.C. fights and nothing really ever happens, except usually really bad things. Apparently, we diverted billions of dollars from Social Security to pay for this impeachment farce, which I'm kind of mad about because I got my Social Security email today, and looks like I'll be working and having to work until I'm 75 at this point. But anyway, this Women's Health Protection Act, what they're trying to do is go nuclear, as I said at the beginning of the show, and say, no states. They're going to get rid of federalism completely now. No states should be allowed to pass abortion laws that restrict abortion anyway. So if the ERA fails, which we know it's going to fail, the ERA, their kind of dream is that the ERA would enshrine abortions in the Constitution, force every taxpayer to pay for abortions, because states that have passed state ERAs, New Mexico and Connecticut, their state Supreme Courts swiftly found this right to taxpayer-funded abortion as soon as it was passed. So if ERA doesn't work, which we know it doesn't work, it's not going to work. This is part of they're throwing things up against the wall, seeing what sticks. Their next thing is this Women's Health Protection Act. I think it must be similar to the FOCA Act, the Freedom of Choice Act, that President Obama, I think when he was running for president, promised to sign the law, but didn't go anywhere. I have really funny t-shirts we made. It was like, what the FOCA? And we took them up for a lobby day on Capitol. That was personally a lot of fun. We did some really fun signs on that. But anyway, so Women's Health Protection Act, it's bad news. There was a hearing. It's not going to go anywhere. It has 203 sponsors in the House of Representatives. So I would look up to see if your representative is a sponsor of this. I've already looked up mine. Mine's good. Thankfully, because I live out here in the middle of nowhere outside of Pittsburgh in the farm country. So yeah, you need to look up and see if your representative is a sponsor of this. If he is, if she is, you need to call and give him peace of your mind. So it may pass the House of Representatives. I think it's really, honestly, a stupid move to do it in the middle of election year because it's really only going to be helping President Trump and the Republicans. But honestly, I don't think the Democrats are even thinking anymore about trying to win an election. They're just doing whatever the heck they want. I mean, think about the Democrats in Virginia. They've been in power for 5 weeks, and they've already fundamentally transformed the entire state when it comes to abortion laws and gun rights laws. I mean, this is a state that's been going blue for the past several presidential elections. All they're doing, baby, is ginning up the Republican base. And I don't know who's advising these people, but politics, it's usually an election year. You kind of lay low on the craziness and you wait until after the election, and then you can go full on crazy. Democrats are just, that's what's so amazing to me right now is these primaries are imploding. Now we're talking about, we have open candidates running for president of the United States who are openly espousing socialism, and it's literally a fight as to who's going to give you more free stuff and more free money, which I don't know who's paying for all of this. But then they're going this like extreme abortion route, which the majority of Americans oppose. I mean, this is like crazy town. So Women's Health Protection Act, pay attention to it. It's going to come up. Like literally every state law, any ban on abortion, any requirement that abortionists have to have, give out medically accurate information about what happens to a woman in abortion. For God forbid she actually be empowered to have full information. Anything like that. The requirement that a woman have to see her child or not even, most states don't even require you, just be offered the opportunity to see your child before the abortionist chops him or her to pieces or sucks him apart. All of that would be illegal. I mean, this is crazy town, but this is what we're talking about. So those are the three things that you did not hear about this week on the mainstream news, but I'm telling you, everything related to Abortion Act, ERA, Born Alive, Abortion Survivors Protection Act, Women's Health Protection Act. Okay. Now, all of this was just this week in Washington, D.C. And this isn't even this podcast isn't even political, but I feel like I've been talking about politics a lot, and I'm really sorry. And if you hate politics, I'm just going to warn you, 2020 is not really going to be your year because we're going to be talking about politics a lot. But it's actually a good sign because for a long time, both parties kind of ignored pro-lifers or just used us when, election time came around. But things are changing. So that's good. And politics is one place we fight in the pro-life movement. It's not the be-all, end-all. We have a very broad and diverse movement with lots of niches. I don't believe there's a silver bullet. If there was, baby, let me know because I want to end abortion as fast as possible. I don't think that's possible, but we are going to be talking about politics a lot. Now, I'll do my little advertisement for LaCroix because I had to take a break because I got myself so worked up here. Okay, now, this week, crazy. Democrats insane. But they're not slowing down. So the first week in March, we're going to have a hearing on the HER Act. This is called the Global Health Empowerment and Rights Act. Ooh, sounds so good. This bill, let me just read you the quote, will establish that a foreign non-governmental organization shall not be disqualified from receiving certain U.S. international development assistance solely because the organization provides medical services using non-U.S. government funds if the medical services are legal in both the United States and the country in which they're being provided, i.e. abortion. This is what they call the global gag rule, that it's unfair that U.S. taxpayer dollars aren't funding organizations overseas that provide health care that perform abortions. This is a way to kind of circumvent what President Trump has done by reinstating the Mexico City policy. That was one of the first things he did as president, was reinstate and actually expand Mexico City policy. So This hearing's coming up I think it's the first week in March, I found out this week. The other thing that you haven't heard about, but you might hear about, just maybe if we do our job in the pro-life movement, we'll see, is the Supreme Court case, June Medical Services versus Gee out of Louisiana. I was told the names are going to change in this case because there's like a new attorney general or something. So it might change, but it's June Medical Services case is what we're calling it. The hearing is March 4th. Students for Life Action, Students for Life America will have students. We're the worker bees. So we have to camp out overnight. We'll do a prayer vigil and we have to reserve the space. And we have this whole like logistical thing we're doing with all the different pro-life organizations across the country and working together as one. But we'll also be out there June and decision day. It's always like, it'll be raining and freezing and cold in March, and then June it's going to be like 120 degrees, and that's why if you ever like Google image my name, it's always terrible images because it's always these protests we did in June with Obamacare. But this case is interesting because it's very similar to the Hellerstedt case a couple years ago that we lost in 2013. That was the bill that said, the Texas bill that said, these abortion facilities have to have admitting privileges for doctors who commit abortions. They have to have the same standards, medical health standards as other surgical ambulatory centers, which makes sense, right? Like, we're not making these women these safety standards. The pro-life movement hasn't created the safety standards. We're just saying if you're an abortion facility, you should be at the very least complying with basic health and safety standards in order to quote unquote empower women to kill their child. So this is a similar case. It's a law that's very similar to the Texas law. What's really interesting here is it is a abortionist, not a woman who says she was harmed by this law. This is an abortionist saying they shouldn't have to comply. And they're saying they're bringing this case on behalf of potential women who will be, quote unquote, harmed because they can't kill their baby fast enough. Yep, that's what the case is about. What's terrifying the abortion industry on this case is that this will be the first time we have 5 pro-life Supreme Court justices on the court. We have Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. And so I don't actually think we have, and I've said this before, I don't actually think we have enough justices on the court to reverse Roe versus Wade because conservative justices tend to be just that conservative. And I think we're going to need 6 or 7, and they're probably going to want a woman to lead the charge because we all know who really leads the charge on all these things are the women. They're the ones who are the bold, courageous fighters. Sorry, guys. We need more strong men. We're starting a whole pro-life men's fellowship, the Invictus Men's Fellowship at Students for Life, just to encourage our young men. That's in March. You should apply if you're a young man. But anyway, so I don't actually think it's as scary as the abortion industry is making out to be. Like, their fundraising emails right now are like, oh my gosh, this case is coming up, this Gee case, and Roe, they are going to use this case to reverse Roe, and it's going to be pandemonium, and women, are going to go back to the kitchens being barefoot and pregnant and not have any choices in life because they won't be able to legally abort their children. I don't think it's going to be that way. One, when Roe is reversed, that's not what's gonna happen. I talk about that a lot on my abortion, make abortion illegal again campus tour, which is starting up. Apparently, my first stop this semester is Notre Dame. Pray for me. But I don't think it's going to be that radical because the conservative justices tend to be conservative, unlike the liberal justices. They don't just try to make up stuff out of thin air. But this is something to be paying attention to. And you're going to be hearing me talk about it in March and then in June. And if you're in DC and you want to join us in DC, make sure you come. I think Students for Life is going to do a national student leadership summit and kind of get all of our student leaders because we always do a big training anyway. That way students can be there for this historic case. So stay tuned for that. So the abortion lobby isn't going to stop. It doesn't look like they're going to stop. Despite it being an election year, they haven't gotten the memo to shut the hell up about abortion. Or the fact that, I don't know, Planned Parenthood's just feeding them this fanciful information. We're in the majority. Don't worry, everyone loves you. No. Look at the polls. The majority of Americans oppose late-term abortion, oppose abortion in the 2nd and 3rd trimester. Actually, was really interesting. The night before the national summit, I was sitting at my hotel room at 2 a.m. trying to write my speech. And I was looking up things because, I get distracted when I have to write a speech. So I was looking up, polling, statistical analysis. And there was actually a really interesting poll where The poll was really bad, saying, it was a Kaiser poll, and it was saying, majority of Americans are pro-choice, blah, 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 blah. And so bad numbers, bad, 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 bad. And then they asked, well, should fetal rights be upheld when a heartbeat is detected? 49% at that moment said yes. So that's like all abortions. The challenge is most people don't know when fetal heartbeat begins. And that's what Students for Life are going to be doing actually on our spring tour. It's going to be called Heart to Heart. We're going to be talking about, when does the heart begin to beat? When can you hear the heart begin to beat? Isn't that at least common ground? Shouldn't we at least acknowledge that when there's a heartbeat, there's life? Yeah. Okay, so abortion lobby, Democrats have lost their mind. They're just going full on. We need to continue to expose it. We need to continue to talk about it. But meanwhile, the pro-life gen, not only are we fighting these horrific bills, we're also preparing for post-Roe America. So I just want to tell you two good news stories here to end this podcast. One, last week, something amazing happened that you did not hear about it. The Virginia Senate passed a bill unanimously, 40-0, to speed up foster care placement in the state of Virginia, which was written by the help of Students for Life Action. It was introduced by Republican State Senator Bryce Reeves with Students for Life Action. Had the pleasure of educating voters in his district this November on, and all of his pro-life beliefs and stance and all the amazing things he's done. So Senator Reeves helped us write this legislation. And this is very simple. All it does is it allows the state to approve more people, more citizens to be home study inspectors. The home study, a lot of times, if you want to become a foster parent, it takes a long time, because in many states you have to wait for a social worker, and social workers are underpaid, they're understaffed. But so the idea was, well, you've got retired teachers, retired firemen, retired policemen. These are citizens who are in good standing, who've been trained already. Why couldn't these people also conduct these background checks on potential foster care and families and adoptive families? This legislation, not only did it pass unanimously in the state Senate, we even had a NARAL-backed Democratic state sponsor, a woman, co-sponsor this legislation after it was dropped. Huge. I don't think that's ever happened. This is the National Pro-Life Organization's sponsored legislation passed unanimously with a NARAL-backed candidate as a co-sponsor. I love it. The other thing you won't hear about, and I was reading this on our blog at Students for Life, it's sometimes hard to keep up with 1,275 Students for Life groups across the country. I don't hear about everything anymore. It makes me so sad. So anyway, our team was adding up some numbers from the fall 2019 semester, and just from the students, now let me just give you a caveat. A lot of Students for Life groups do not report to us what they do, and they need to, because it makes for better stories and we can help them, but they don't always do it. But anyway, so our Pregnant on Campus Students for Life groups. So these are our groups that have raised their hand and said, I want to transform my campus to be supportive of pregnant parenting students. Just of those Pregnant on Campus identified Students for Life groups, we found out just those groups, and this is a small sampling, raised 150,000 diapers in the fall semester for moms and children. Our Pregnant on Campus Students for Life groups, they hosted at least 85 fundraisers for local pregnancy resource centers, which we know led to at least $22,250 for these PNCs. We also know in the fall semester, Students for Life groups raised over $33,000 for scholarships for pregnant and parenting students on their campuses. We also know our groups that have reported to us, and once again, a small sampling, spent over 1,000 hours directly meeting with women who are facing unplanned pregnancies. This is crazy. This is insane. This is what the pro-life generation is about. So the next time you hear some nasty person on Twitter, someone you're debating, say the pro-life movement, all they care about these fetuses that mean nothing. First of all, correct them on that and explain, biology, and then, explain philosophy. But then talk to them about what you're doing and what the pro-life generation's doing. That we do put our money where our mouth is. And our job is hard because not only do we have to advocate against the violence of abortion, we also have to be proactive and make sure no woman ever feels like she has to choose that violence of abortion, that she has to walk into those doors, into that predatory abortionist who we know is going to prey upon her, who goes to the Supreme Court and literally argues that he or she shouldn't have to uphold basic safety standards in order to vend abortions to her. This is what the pro-life generation is all about. This is what we do all the time. This is who we are. So don't be ashamed of it. Talk about it and make sure you start calling your members of Congress, you start calling your U.S. senators, you start calling your state legislators, and you let them know you're paying attention to what you're doing. And if they're a Democrat, ask them why the hell they've lost their minds on abortion. Have they not read a poll? Offer to go meet with them. Go meet with their district office, their chief of staff, the district office. Go to Washington, D.C., meet with them, and just show them the polls. Show them just interviews. Bring them a sampling of young people to say, look, this is where the majority of America stands. The majority of America is against the violence of abortion. Why don't you join us? Join us. All right, guys, that's it for my podcast. My kids are getting ready to go to bed, and I'm traveling tomorrow, so I've got to go kiss them and hug them goodbye. But I hope you'll pass the word about the podcast on to your friends. Make sure you subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts and share this video if you're watching on Facebook. Share it with your pro-life friends. And don't forget, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter. Maybe you can offset all of the nasty comments I get all the time. I'll see you all next week and talk to you all next week. Bye.